South of the Appalachian Mountains, and a mere 47 miles from Atlanta, a vast body of water stretches across northern Georgia. But it wasn't always so. Since its completion in 1956, Lake Lanier has claimed some 700 souls. But beneath its murky waters may lay countless more, and according to some, they're restless. Named after Confederate poet Sidney Lanier, famous for his poem Song of the Chattahoochee being the river that feeds the lake, it's a popular tourist spot that averages over 10 million visitors a year who come to see 692 miles of shoreline, and it's easy to see why. From the surface, it's hard to tell it's not a natural lake, but one look beneath the water tells a very different story. Underneath, you'll find downed trees, foundations, rubble, plenty of evidence that the lake wasn't always there, and during droughts, that history only becomes more visible. For example, in 1980, a drought revealed a large pile of rocks under the lake that came to the surface, and in 2007, a drought actually revealed parts of the old Gainesville Speedway. But if God or nature didn't dump 625 billion gallons of water on some rural communities, who did? You guessed it, the government. See, back in the late 40s, Atlanta was growing, and like any growing city, it was ravenous. It needed more water, and it needed more power. So in 46, Congress approved $1 billion for the US Corps of Engineers to construct a dam on the Chattahoochee River. This dam would be called the Burford Dam, or the Buford Dam. Is it Buford or Burford? This would become the Buford Dam. The Corps of Engineers started clearing the ground. They cut down trees, took down buildings, anything that could float was deemed a hazard, and it had to go. And while the people actually living in the community were actually apparently happy to see the development that the dam would bring to the area and be compensated by the government, the dead weren't exactly in a position to up and leave. That left the Engineer Corps with another controversial project, exhuming them. For marked graves, that was easy enough, and the Engineering Corps moved over 1,000 bodies from 20 cemeteries. You can't move something if you don't know it's there, and nobody knows just how many unmarked graves are lying beneath the water. Possibly the most notorious haunt of Lake Lanier is the Lady of the Lake, and if you find yourself crossing the Jackson Bridge at night, you might just see her. She's said to be a spectral figure, clad in a blue dress and missing both her arms. Lost and restless, she beckons people towards the water before dragging them to a watery grave. Lake Lanier was officially filled in 1957, but tragedy would strike just the following year. Two women were driving home from a dance in the neighboring town of Dawsonville when their car swerved off the Highway 53 bridge and plunged into the lake. The names of these two women were Delia Mae Parker Young and Susie Roberts, but they wouldn't actually be identified for another 32 years. In 1990, a construction crew were doing repairs on the bridge, and in doing so, found a Ford from the 1950s submerged beneath it. The license plate matched the one belonging to Susie Roberts, and so did the body in the driver's seat. But where was Delia's body then? Well, it had actually already been discovered. See, back in 1959, a fisherman discovered a swollen body in the water, and when he pulled it out, he was wearing a blue dress and had no hands. The amount of damage done made identifying her practically impossible, but now there was no question about it. Some people who go swimming in Lake Lanier report being pulled or tugged beneath the water by ghostly arms that they can't really see. Maybe those are just the arms that the Lady of the Lake is missing. Or maybe there's something older. As mentioned before, Lake Lanier was built on settlements long established, and these settlements weren't without their own history. One in particular that gets a lot of attention is the town of Oscarville, but it was by no means the only one. Around 50 years before work on the Buford Dam even began, Oscarville was a town of mostly farmers and sharecroppers, the majority of whom were black. At least that's what everything I've researched is telling me, because no census data actually seems to exist or survive. Much like anywhere else in Georgia at the time, it was segregated. Now, if you go to any modern news article regarding Oscarville, it will tell you about how the white residents turned on the blacks overnight and drove them out in a vicious racial cleansing. And that's not untrue, but in looking at sources closer to the event, there seems to be a little bit more to it than that. Obviously, I wasn't there, but I'm piecing it together as best I can from what I do have available. For a bit of background, racial tensions were an all-time high from previous riots in Atlanta, and I should have grabbed that. I might need them. Racial tensions were high in the county over riots in Atlanta previously and the attempted rape of a woman earlier in the year. This all boiled over with a second attack on a woman named May Crow. On Sunday, September 8th, May Crow was walking home, where she was dragged into the woods by a man named Ernest Knox, which is a fucking ironic name for what happens next. There, she had her eye gouged out and her head bashed in with a rock before being left unconscious under a pile of leaves. Yeah, there's a lot of names here. Knox then left to meet his friends, Oscar Daniels, his sister Jane Daniels, her husband Rob Edwards, and a man by the name of Ed Collins. The group returned to the woods around midnight, when Knox and Oscar Daniels had their way with the still unconscious May Crow. May Crow wouldn't actually be found until 9 AM the next day, where she was found by a search party near the main road. She was alive, but barely. There was no telling if she was going to wake up. Nearby, the search party also found a small mirror that was apparently distinctive enough to trace back to Knox himself, and so he was arrested the next day. In reaction to the arrest, a mob of good old boys surrounded the jail, threatening to come in and kill Knox themselves. The chief of police, not wanting this to happen, arranged for him to be transported to another jail out of town. The next day, Collins, Edwards, and both Daniels were arrested too. See, they'd said that Knox was with them the entire night, but when the mirror had been found tying Knox to the scene, that also tied them to it, or at least shot the shit out of their alibi. The mob, in their eyes, seeing 4 more perpetrators show up, it was enough for them to go ballistic. They stormed the jail, forced themselves into the cell of Rob Edwards, and shot him in the head, killing him instantly. They tied a noose around his lifeless neck, dragged him into the town square, and lynched him from a telegraph pole. Some newspapers seem to report that it was Ed Collins that was killed, and not Rob Edwards, the Ed being the confusing connection, but this seems to have been a mistake on the newspapers. Either way, it was Jane Daniels' husband that died first. Spoilers. Not wanting any more of his prisoners dead in the same fashion, the chief of police arranged for everyone else to go to the Fulton County Tower too. A few weeks later, on September 23rd, May Crow finally succumbed to her injuries and died. He'd been in a comatose state for 15 days. The trials of Oscar Daniels and Ernest Knox happened on October 3rd. The National Guard was called in to keep the peace and prevent any more frontier justice. Despite an enormous crowd gathering outside the courthouse, there was no significant disruptions. During the trials, Jane Daniels actually testified against her brother Oscar. Ed Collins also testified against his friends as a witness to their crimes, although some assume these testimonies were coerced. As a result, the charges against Jane Daniels and Ed Collins were dropped. I just realized she's married and they have different surnames.
She didn't take on the last name?
Maybe. Knox and Oscar Daniels were found guilty, sentenced to be hung after a 21-day mandatory wait period. This wait period, I believe, was so that their lawyers could challenge the ruling, but their lawyers made it explicitly clear that that wasn't going to happen. So, I guess they got dropped too. On October 25th, they were dropped again, only this time with ropes around their neck. There was meant to be no spectators or demonstrations at the execution, with the National Guard building a wooden barricade to keep people from watching. But this wasn't really effective, because people would just go up onto the foothills and watch the whole thing from above. And some sort of disturbance must have broken out, because eventually this barricade caught on fire and came down, and everyone got a good look anyway. So how does this story relate to Lake Lanier? Well, previous to these lynchings, and definitely more so after them, Oscarville and Forsyth County at large was being terrorized by a group of not very nice white people. They wanted to drive blacks out of the county, along with anyone sympathetic to them. And while the gang wasn't large, with anywhere from 6 to 30 members, they were very unpredictable and very violent. Following the lynchings of Knox and Daniels, as well as subsequent attacks from the Night Riders, a lot of black people didn't really feel safe in Forsyth County anymore. I can't imagine why. So started a gradual exodus from Forsyth to places like Hall and Gainesville and beyond. The more black people that left, the less there was to support the ones who stayed. And slowly, over 10 years, the town of Oscarville and the community around it unraveled. And it's not as if everyone was happy with this. According to some accounts, a lot of the white people there saw the black people as their neighbors, separate but equal neighbors. Some white people tried to help fight off the Night Riders, posting up with rifles and shotguns on their lawns. Others would sneak black farmers off the land to neighboring counties only to sneak them back on when it was time to harvest their crops, and they'd help out that way. While well-intentioned, all of this shit seemed to just invite the Night Riders to attack their property too. A lot of people fleeing Oscarville did so by crossing the Chattahoochee River. Some believe that what haunts Lake Lanier is the spirits of dead blacks that didn't make it across, exacting their revenge on those who swim in the waters that swallowed their land. But then again, it wasn't always their land. Long before blacks or whites showed up in Georgia, or the USA at all, the land along the Chattahoochee belonged to the Cherokee Nation. But in 1830, that was soon to change. So your boy Andrew Jackson had signed the Indian Removal Act into law, allowing the United States government to forcibly relocate natives to the west of the Mississippi River. And that they did. Along with their black slaves, because apparently the Cherokee kept slaves, and I didn't know that. Over 60,000 people were evicted from their homes, forced to relocate on reservations out west. The routes they would take were fraught with danger and loss, and would collectively come to be known as the Trail of Tears. Mapping out these routes, one of them begins right where Oscarville would come to be. Now, remember that large pile of rocks I said surfaced in the drought of 1980? Yeah, well, that wasn't actually just a large pile of rocks. It was a burial mound. The Summerau Mound. According to the US Corps of Engineers, they actually knew the mound was there the whole time. They just didn't move it. And I don't know, should they? It kind of seems like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Get it? Because they damned the river. What I do know is it's not an Americana folk story if there's not at least one disrespected Indian burial ground. So what lurks beneath Lake Lanier? Layers of history, folklore, and loss. Generations of human struggle. But if you go to Lake Lanier, that's not what you need to worry about. Black, white, native, it doesn't matter. It's the water that kills you all the same. So respect it. Know your limits. Don't be a fucking moron. There are other strange anecdotes regarding the lake with a bit less background, but I still think are quite interesting. For example, some people report hearing church bells beyond the lake when they're boating there, despite there being no evidence of a church remaining below the lake. The church that the blacks had in Oscarville was burnt down by the Night Riders, and if there was still a church by the time the Corps of Engineers got there, it would assumedly have been taken down on account of the big wooden steeple. Some people report seeing a spectral, hooded figure using a pole to cross the deepest parts of the lake as if it was shallow water. And some report seeing giant catfish the size of cars that when a chicken truck crashed into the lake in 1980 would jump out and swallow the chickens whole. Now I've never been to Lake Lanier, but my wife has, and while she saw nothing spooky, did find a spent shotgun shell, so make of that what you will. Before I finish the video, I just want to give a big thank you to my wife for helping make this happen, and a big thank you to you for watching it. See you soon. Your boy Andrew Jackson had signed the Indian Removal Act into law, allowing the United States military to forcibly relocate. How does this story relate to I'm glad you asked, bucko, because I don't have a fucking clue anymore. The names of these two women would fuck and shit. That's the idea, is we just fix it all in post. Forced to replay the fuck me. They were forced to fuck me, and fuck me they did. The giant Sorry, I just... Over 60,000 people did cocaine off my asshole. Beneath its fucking watery waters, murky waters, fucking watery waters.